these are the bullet points that must-haves to kind of like be termed as ungrading and labor-based grading. So you need a grading agreement document with a philosophy statement that helps explore like why you're doing the thing, which we just talked about. How is it socially just? How is it going to be different? What's my role? What's your role, etc. There should be negotiation processes for that document, which is the grading agreement, because that's the other way that students interact with this course. They help you build it. You might come with a draft of like what this thing is going to look like, and then from that draft, students are able to say like, yeah, this seems fair, and have larger conversations about it. We use the word negotiation. It's really not a negotiation in the formal sense of the word. It's more of a grading agreement conversation that you have with multiple students. That in and of itself is a really loaded conversation, and it gets to be really difficult and requires a lot of facilitation. Needless to say, it's there, and there's a process for it. There's a method for students to mindfully account for their labor and gather consistent evidence of their labor. So a lot of people like to use like labor logs for this, like an actual Excel spreadsheet. Anytime a student's doing anything outside of class, kind of termed in a binary, reading or writing, they put like, I spent this much time reading this chapter or something like that, or reading this essay. I spent 20 minutes reading this essay outside of class. I find that students have a hard time keeping track of that, because I've had a hard time keeping track of that. So I don't ask them to do that, but I do ask them to kind of think about, when you're sitting down to read, make a note of when you started, make a note of when you end, so that it's written somewhere, so that you have some kind of mechanism to keep track of that. And then by the end of the week, they're reflecting in a weekly journal about like, oh, I spent this much time outside of class doing this work, and I think like that impacted me in this way, or I didn't have this much time to do that thing, and I wish I would have had more time. Whatever that equates to, this kind of like honest reflection about how much time they spent, and how they think that's contributing to their forward momentum in the course, or not. Also, there should be a formal moment or two in the term to reflect upon students' labor as practice over time. So I use conference as critique in this way. When students come in for conferences with me, usually once or twice during the term, they'll come with a statement about how much time they're spending doing work outside of the course, how they feel about that, those kind of things. We have a general conversation about it. No points or grades on any student work. So the only thing that is graded is that like there's a grading breakdown table or some articulation to show how grades are calculated, like final grades are calculated based on labor only. And then there's also an articulation and negotiation process for what counts as labor. So basically we have to define labor as a class and what that looks like, which is usually part of the contract language as well. Okay, so some takeaways at this moment in time after my last 8 months of doing this work. A lot of the questions I get from people, either like who are teachers or aren't teachers, when I talk to people who aren't teachers, they're like, oh, wow, that's crazy. I can't believe you do that. And even some people who are teachers are like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't think it would work. So does it work? It's not perfect. Just like grading on an A, B, C, D, F scale is not perfect. This isn't either. I don't know that there is a perfect assessment strategy. If I can get closer to measuring engagement, I think I'm doing better. So I'm not 100% happy with labor-based grading, but it's closer. It's a closer way to measure engagement, I think, than letter grades. So I feel good about that. I think also too, it has closed some equity gaps in my class, and it's opened up conversations in ways that conversations haven't been opened up before, and that's been really exciting and really fun, and also sometimes really stressful. Students are certainly more engaged; they're more driven. What I've found is that it's often the more classically high achieving students who struggle with the system, because they understand how to get ahead. Like if we're talking about gaming the game, like oftentimes high achieving students are the ones that are adept at gaming the game. How much time, like they know how much time to spend, they know the excuses to use, they know like, when to get things done, et cetera, et cetera. They're used to kind of navigating the system because it's been made for them. And when you switch that up, there's some pushback. And that's been somewhat uncomfortable, but also not the end of the world. So quality. And this is the thing that I'm really struggling with, and still consistently struggle with, is like, my ultimate goal as an instructor, and I've had to really reevaluate this, is like not to make clones of myself. I don't want students to look at writing through my lens, adopt my voice or my style conventions, and that's really the risk of instructor-created rubrics, I think, for writing assignments. instance, not every single time, but I think it can be, students can just imitate and mimic what we want, and that doesn't necessarily equate to learning, right? That's akin to just memorization to some extent, and grade chasing and all that kind of stuff. And I really how do we get away from that? I think it's one of the most difficult things of teaching. It can be really great for that class because they're going to do really well in that class, of course, but beyond that class, I don't know if it's helping them much. If I can help them gain understanding of their own aesthetic preferences, their own go-to writing moves, if I can give them a place to kind of experiment and room to fail, and try again also, even with something I don't love stylistically or grammatically or conventionally, then I think that helps them build confidence in their writing to take forward with them. And that's, I think, when I'm being honest with myself as an instructor, that's what I want. I'm often working against my own context and my own background and my own schooling and my own education. So there's that too. That doesn't mean that we don't talk about quality in the class. We do talk about quality. We talk about quality in sample essays we read, but I don't red pen students' essays and make them correct their grammar and make them correct their spelling and make them correct their punctuation. Instead, the class is making a document about quality together, and we're having those conversations so they feel like they're coming up with these aspects of quality, and for the most part they are, right? They're discovering okay, what makes this effective? What makes this, what is ineffective about this? And that becomes like an individual level negotiation with themselves, which is a really cool thing to see happen. The idea here is that students get better at the thing by returning to the thing, like examining the thing, thinking about the thing, and writing about the thing. The same concept for any area of learning outside of the classroom. Like, how do you get better? Basically by consistently doing something. If you're practicing martial arts, nobody's giving you an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F. You're consistently returning to that thing to get better at it. If you're learning how to cook, you keep coming back and keep cooking and you get better at it. Those are the kind of things we're thinking about here. How can we apply that to college? Some shortcomings. So some problems I've run into. The biggest one I found recently, and I've explored and kind of done some research on, is that while labor-based grading is a great mechanism for racial equity, it is not a great mechanism when it comes to equity in terms of disability. This idea of labor, who can do labor, what labor is, are often couched in terms of ableism and keeping and not thinking about disability. And so I'm still working out that and sitting with it and figuring out how to better, make this kind of system also work for disabled students and be more equitable in that way. We've talked about this a couple times. The other one is gaming the game. I often get this question from people. So students game the game if they want to game the game. I think ultimately, even in a traditional grading system, they do that. I guess the question I always have is why is that my problem? I don't think it's a sense of control. Why do I want to control students to do that? There's some confrontations about decentering my power and my power in the classroom that I think are really important there, and that I've had to confront when it comes to those things. Basically, I found out overall that students really don't do this. It's a lot of assumptions that we have as instructors and professors, and a lot of that goes into trust and compassion and all that kind of great stuff. But basically, the class culture that we create with a system like this tends to encourage engagement and support. And that's the cool thing about it, I think, is to watch students do that. Other things, can it be applied to other disciplines? I'm sure there are ways to incorporate labor-based grading in other disciplines, and I'm sure a lot of you tuned out as soon as I said quality doesn't matter, but I'm sure, quality matters, certainly in other disciplines, and even in other writing fields for sure. And there are probably ways to adapt methods of ungrading and labor-based grading. And so if you're well, I can't do that because I have to, we have to take quality into account when it comes to this. Yeah, but there are still probably ways to engage in ungrading or labor-based grading when it comes to that. But I haven't done research on it, so I couldn't tell you. Some resources that I've used. So this book-length essay was great. Or short book, I guess. Ellen Carrillo's The Hidden Inequities of a Labor-Based Grading Contract. Felisa Rose Chavez has a really fantastic book on decolonizing creative classroom, and it says the writing workshop. But I really do think all of these things can be applied to our own pedagogical practice in whatever discipline we're in. The two main things that the State Board is using is Asao Inoue's Anti-Racist Writing Assessment in Colleges and labor-based grading contracts. those are the 2 books that he has written and that we're using in the State Board project. So those might be useful as well. Some other stuff. Useful websites that I've used. Teachers Going Gradeless is really useful. Like, has a lot of blog posts, has a lot of like suggestions, has a lot of methodology to doing the thing. Megan McIntyre, who runs a writing center at a university, has a page on anti-racist teaching resources, which is basically just like this gigantic Google Doc that she's compiled on her website. It's really fantastic and useful. And then Jesse Stomell has a teaching blog here, and also like a lot of exploration of ungrading, not just labor-based grading, but just like these different methods of labor-based of ungrading that are really fantastic. And then here are some other books that I'm reading right now: Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Bell Hook's Teaching to Transgress, and Peter Elbow's Writing with Power. And I'm really trying to make my way through those things whilst doing this project. But they're not required for the State Board thing, and they're just things that I've been interested in and finally have some time to read. So I've been going forward with that. If you want to contact me and have conversations or anything like that, I'm open to those conversations and questions you might have. You can email me, matthew.young@centralia.edu. Don't call me. I'm a millennial. I don't pick up the phone. So if you try to call my office phone, I'm not even going to put it on here because I probably won't pick it up. Anyway, I'm very sorry for the length of this, but there's no way I could do it any shorter, I don't think. So there's that. Thanks for listening to me, and I will see you next time.